Appreciate it. The purpose of this press conference today is to provide an update concerning the officer-involved shooting that occurred on January 7th, 2020. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Mayor Dan Horton.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. The City of Akron and the Akron Police Department take very seriously our commitment to serving the citizens of Akron in a way that balances the important interests of the public in accessing information and the important interest of law enforcement, and the legal system in arriving at truth throughout investigations and court proceedings. Both interests must be given appropriate consideration in order for the system to work. And the balance between those interests will change over time as investigations move forward and information is shared. In this instance, the balance has at this point shifted toward the disclosure of certain body-worn camera footage. The City of Akron's body-worn camera program is designed both as a tool for transparency and an insurance policy of sorts for our city. The cameras assist us in accurately capturing the events during critical, often dynamic interactions between officers and citizens. Officer-involved shootings are an unwelcome aspect of police work. And as mayor and as mayors across the country, we all wish that our officers never found themselves in that position, where we are forced to make a choice between deadly force. But that simply is not a reality. So I stand here today to reaffirm my commitment to implementing the policies that support safe and effective policing and transparency in our operations. The community is an essential partner in all we do as a city and as law enforcement. I want to thank Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Charles Brown and Chief Ball for their shared commitment to those values. I hope that the video released today provides our community with a broader understanding of the circumstances and context for this incident. And I thank you for your attendance today. Lieutenant?
The information presented today is a summary that reflects the events that are known at this stage of the ongoing investigation. We are providing this information for matters of public interest. Future investigations and the release of any information will continue to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. As always, the Akron Police Department is committed to transparency and professionalism. Out of concern of misleading conclusions regarding this incident and the potential impact misinformation could have on the community, the following presentation was prepared and will now be released. The video that will be shown is an exact representation of the events that were captured by body-worn camera that night. This footage will show the actions that precede the shots being fired in real time, and then a frame-by-frame still view of the most critical sequence. Text has been added for clarity, and a single short audio segment will be highlighted for emphasis. Chief.
Good morning. We do appreciate you being here and an opportunity to speak today in front of you. I'm going to read a portion of my script, and then we will intermittently show portions of the video that relate to what I'll share with you. On January 7th, 2020, uniformed officers attempted to stop a vehicle that was traveling westbound on Russell Avenue. The initiation of the stop was for no visible license plate. The driver and sole occupant was later learned to be Elijah Cade, a person that was wanted for a parole violation for a prior burglary. The car turned southbound on Manchester Road. The driver did not pull over and accelerated away from the marked cruiser, a patrol car that was working a district assignment. Mr. Cade chose not to stop for the officer's lights and audible siren. He created a risk to himself and to the public. This is an offense of failure to comply with an order or signal of a police officer for which he has been indicted. This crime is a felony of the 3rd degree. The officers notified the dispatch center that the vehicle had not yielded and that they had a chase. Officers relayed information over the radio, including the speed that reached 90 miles per hour. The video will also display an overhead map that will outline the locations of this interaction from start to finish, a distance that covered approximately 1.5 miles.
Silver Chevy Cavalier. Southbound Manchester just past Clearview, speeds are 80. We are still southbound Manchester. Speeds are 90.
A patrol supervisor canceled the pursuit after 1 minute and 19 seconds. These events are captured on the passenger officer's body-worn camera. The supervisor's order occurred at the same time as the cruiser strikes an island curb that divides Manchester Road at the split for the Manchester Road bypass. The dispatcher can be heard repeating the cancel over the air. Following the termination of the pursuit, and within a few seconds, the officers could see that the car had crashed into a utility pole just south of the intersection of Manchester Road and Kenmore Boulevard. This is reflected on the video when an officer calls out a Signal 8, which is the Akron Police Department radio call for a vehicular accident. Investigators found no evidence that Cade attempted to brake prior to striking the pole, as there were no visible skid marks on the pavement. The officers exited their cruiser and approached the suspect car. Additional units that were responding to the call arrived almost simultaneously. The driver of the original patrol unit turned on his camera as he exited the patrol car. A responding officer also activated his body-worn camera. The video that we will play reflects these three views. The recordings have been synchronized. It will be shown together to allow the viewer a unique picture of events that are happening simultaneously. As officers approached the car, they observed Mr. Cade slumped over the wheel and called for a Signal 32, which is our radio code for a response of emergency medical services. They believed that the driver was injured. The car was filled with powder that had been released from the auto's steering wheel airbag, which had deployed. Within several seconds, one officer notified the others that the suspect's eyes had opened. Multiple officers then ordered him not to move and to show his hands. Those commands were repeated many times. Cade began reaching around inside of the car despite those warnings from officers. He did not respond to those commands, ignoring the officers' lawful orders, as he had moments prior when he fled from a traffic stop that was also lawful.
17 round scene. Yeah, he needed to He's out, he's out, he's out. Yeah. Approach on the driver's side. He's right there. No, he's out. Hey, get in your vest. Get in your vest. Yes, sir. 30. Got a window punch if you need to. Nothing in this hand. Seatbelt on. Hands. His eyes are open. Yeah, his eyes are closed. Keep closed. Hey, boy. Hey. Yeah, you can release the chair. Open the door. I got the door open. I got the door open. I don't like
At this point, the suspect suddenly exited the car. 2 officers reported hearing the suspect mention a gun. This is confirmed on the tape when he can be heard to say, "Gun at."
Hands up! Hands up! Hands up! Get on the ground. Done that.
After running approximately 50 feet, Mr. Cage stopped suddenly and turned toward the officers unexpectedly with his hands together at his waist. Cade raised his arms in front of his body and pointed directly at the officers. This specific position is called a shooter stance, or on target to those that train with firearms. 3 officers separately perceived a threat of serious harm or death and fired their service weapons. This series of events occurred in a couple seconds. It included the suspect's flight, rapid turn, assumption of a shooting posture, the officer's perception of a deadly threat, and their response of shots fired to protect their safety and that of others on the scene. 2 of the rounds that were fired hit the suspect. After Cade was struck and following his apprehension, officers immediately rendered first aid until EMS arrived and took over. While Akron fire officers were treating Cade and preparing him for transport to the hospital, our police officers secured the scene. And per APD procedure, notifications were made and investigators responded to process the scene. Elijah Cade's deliberate actions presented officers with what they perceived to be an imminent risk of physical harm or death. The officers were forced to make a split-second decision in tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving encounter. The Akron Police Department works extremely hard every day to earn the community's trust and we remain committed to protecting the public while serving the needs of everyone that we contact. That process will continue in this case as APD works with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations and the Summit County Prosecutor's Office to offer a thorough, professional, and legitimate investigative product to our citizens who deserve no less. At this point in time, I'm going to introduce Deputy Chief Jesse Lacer, who will review our officer-involved death or serious injury investigation procedure.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Major Leeser, and I head up the investigative subdivision here at the Akron Police Department. I'm here to give you a brief overview of the procedure when the Akron Police Department is involved in an incident where an officer used force and we have a serious injury to a suspect. I want to stress that this is just an overview and in no way includes all the steps and processes of this type of investigation. Detectives in my division are charged with investigating these types of incidents. After a scene is safe, medical treatment is immediately dispatched. We then start a process for an investigation into the event. This is the same process we do on any incident involving a serious injury to a suspect. We partner with the Summit County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and both will send representatives right to the scene. Detectives from the Akron Police Department are also immediately dispatched. These are well-trained investigators that also typically handle our homicide investigations. Also notified to come to the scene are representatives from the Office of Professional Standards and Accountability, it's commonly referred to as Internal Affairs, and also the Independent Police Auditor. At the scene, several things are happening simultaneously. In no particular order, I will outline some of those for you. Medical needs are taken care of. Witnesses are identified. The involved officers are separated and removed from the scene. A crime scene is identified, marked, and secured by officers. All body-worn cameras of involved officers are collected by the very first supervisor on scene. These cameras are kept secured. The videos are later uploaded and restricted, so only investigators and command staff can review them. An electronic audit is kept of all that view that video. No involved officer is permitted to watch the video until after an official statement is made and recorded. If an officer's weapon is involved, it is photographed to document the condition, and the weapon is then taken into evidence. The scene is canvassed for any possible evidence. Search warrants are filed if necessary in order to collect all possible evidence. Notice is put out to the public by our public information officer. This is done not only to inform the public of the event, but also to request those that might have information to please come forward and assist in the investigation. Our role in this type of incident as investigators are fact gatherers. Once the investigation is complete, all documents and reports are returned over to the Summit County's Prosecutor's Office. That office will rule on the event. I understand that there can be a clamor for immediate information. To know it as we discover it on these types of calls, but our goal is to preserve the integrity of that investigation. Thank you. Lieutenant Miller.
Thank you, Major. At this time, we'll take a few questions. We ask that you please remember that this is an ongoing matter, and questions will be limited to those that do not compromise the ongoing investigation. So if you have any questions, we'll take those questions at this time. Sir, your name? Hang on, sir.
Was Cade armed? Was that weapon ever found?
We specifically wanted to make this evidence available to you, and we certainly at this point want to ask you your opinions. It's certainly difficult to tell that. Do you have any?
Well, did the investigation reveal that he had a weapon on him?
We at this point in the investigation, it was determined that Mr. Cade was not armed. We provide these still photos intentionally to show and demonstrate the intense, rapidly evolving moment that the officers find themselves in, and also having split seconds, a matter of seconds, to determine essentially life or death. And that's what we believe the photographs provide.
Were there shots fired before he got out of the car?
Absolutely not.
Okay. When you were, the second to last video, there's a lot of commotion and screaming, but there was no shots fired.
There were no fire shots. The first shot, we believe, or shots weren't fired until Mr. Cade, he ran at a distance of about 50 feet. He turned toward the officers. He's at a position that we call low ready, a shooter's ready stance. Shots weren't fired even then until Mr. Cade presented both arms outward toward the officers.
Can you play it at real speed so you can see without the words and everything on the screen?
Okay.
Is that going to be on the edited or on that?
I'm not sure, do we have it?
We're going to release today to all media members that are here the video that we've showed today. The full video is not something that we believe was appropriate under these circumstances to show, because obviously showing a video of a shooting with police officers, we want to have a sensitivity to those that are involved with it. But that will be made public in a short period of time, because that has been requested by the defense of Mr. Cade, and I'm sure that will be made public.
And not only that, but out of caution due to the graphic nature of the video, so we want to be respectful for all sides of that. Next question. Ma'am.
There were 5 shots fired. How many hit him?
2 shots struck Mr. Cade.
Was the weapon
Excuse me, Sean.
Did all officers fire?
That is part of the investigation still. We're gathering that, and it's part of the ongoing process at this time, so we won't discuss that specifically. Sir?
Was a weapon found in the car, his vehicle?
At this stage of the investigation, we've simply determined that he was not in possession of a firearm at the time of the shooting.
Okay. Meaning there was nothing found in the car either?
No, sir.
I don't have to tell you that there's a lot of scrutiny involved with officer-involved shootings. Are you concerned about community reaction at all, ultimately being an unarmed African-American male being shot by, I don't know this, but are they white officers or are they not?
Certainly we're concerned, and that's one of the reasons that
We can hear you better. Thanks.
we're certainly concerned. You know, that's why we're here today, is because we're concerned, and that's why this process has not taken the shape and form that it has in other instances. We knew that the video was going to be released because it's not something that's fully under our control until the point that it is either made public through a public records request, or it is obtained by a defense team. And based on statements that have been made so far publicly, one's, for example, 19-year-old, this is a title of an article that was written on this particular incident. 19-year-old shot by officers is another victim of police violence. Another, someone who heard the accident but did not see it. I heard the cops run up to the car. They were screaming, "Let me see your hands, let me see your hands." And then I heard 5 or 6 shots. I was in shock of how somebody could be shooting that quick in that kind of a situation, making it sound as if, and then other people had accused, that the officers ran up and shot this suspect as a result of him running from officers. Another quote that was in the paper: "We surely don't think you opened fire on a kid because he was getting out of a car." That misinformation is damaging to our entire community. So in this particular situation, the decision was made that we would have this released today and allow the public access to the parts of this investigation that we don't believe are compromising.
Lieutenant Miller mentioned this case-by-case basis. Sometimes we think cherry-picking what you're going to release to the media. We're not going to always see the full video. There's been public records requests have been made. They're not always given to us time. How do you respond to the public who says, well, let's put it out there in a quicker fashion so that we all can make our own judgment by seeing the whole video? And not just this case, in cases in general.
I was present in meetings where that decision was made, and obviously you have to consider what are the ramifications. In this particular situation, a video was going to be made public in a short period of time. We were aware of that. With the statements that have already been made and were communicated publicly through large media outlets, the risk to the rest of our citizens for there to be a misinformation or for there to be interpretations that weren't accurate or not fair to our citizens, and it's certainly not fair to the city of Akron and our police department.
One last question. We'll take one last question and we're going to wrap it up.
Do you think you could have released additional information such as he made a threatening posture or some statements to that detail level that wouldn't have compromised your investigation and might have allowed the community to have a better idea what happened earlier in the process?
Okay, there is a caution with every single one of these cases that we don't release information prematurely and then find out that that information is not accurate through other courses of an investigation. Unfortunately, that happened in a prior experience with the Akron Police Department, and it was very harmful. There was nothing that was nefarious about it, but we learned that some of the facts as they were relayed were different, and they can be different. There are different perspectives involved. People remember and see things differently. So our position has been not to release them, and that position is supported by law. This is not just the police department supervisors deciding how we're going to parse out information. It's a very complicated process, and there will be critics on both sides of it, regardless of what statement we make or what process we use. Because tomorrow we'll be accused that we showed information and we haven't shown it before. Yesterday, we were criticized because the information had not been made public yet. So we have, there's a whole lot involved with that. So it is a very difficult situation. The people that make those decisions do the very best with what's at hand, and I've discussed that earlier.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up.